Hello, everybody. I believe we are live, and I want to welcome everybody to the DragonCon digital media track Be Awesome Together, a live stream. This is a way for us to be able to connect between the cons. And today we have a very special presentation and panel for you all about LGBTQ plus themed efforts in the digital media space. This is a very special Pride themed panel that we're doing digitally. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but I think most people know June is Pride Month, and this is the month where we celebrate taking a stand on who we are. You know, if you're not familiar with the Stonewall riots, I'm not here to give a complete history lesson today, but if I were to give you the Explain It Like I'm Five version, it would be basically that, you know, a bunch of people were not allowed to be who they were in public under threat of the cops shutting them down. And it was a bunch of people at the Stonewall Inn, namely trans women of color, who stood up with some bricks and said, we're here, we're queer, we're not going to take it anymore. And that's what Pride Month is all about. I'll say less and introduce my awesome panelists here to celebrate in Pride Month and digital media content and what it means to them. Really quickly, my name is Rob Roberts. He, him, or they is great. I work with the website vognetwork.com, where I have a very long-running podcast called Orange Lounge Radio about video games, and it's really a delight to be here with you all today. But again, I don't want to make it about me because we have an amazing, diverse group of LGBTQIA+ panelists, so I want to turn it over to them. So if you wouldn't mind, tell me a little bit about your name, your pronouns, and what kind of content you create out there. So I'm gonna pick on Sue first because I found out we were on vacation together earlier this year. So I'll start with Sue.
Isn't that wild? I mean, small world. We'll be on vacation together again in August, September.
That's the family reunion.
So, yeah. Hi, I'm Sue, she, her. I am a podcaster with Women at Warp. We are a Star Trek podcast that focuses on discussing the franchise from an intersectional feminist point of view. So we talk about, we'll do deep dives into episodes. We'll talk about themes or characters or behind the scenes stuff. Just really even fandom, all aspects. And we try to always sort of dissect and say, how could we make this better? How could we push this further forward? And one of the things we love to say, that until recently anyway, was put it on TV, you cowards. Don't tell me that a character is queer in a comic book or a novel. Put it on TV. I am also, as far as DragonCon goes, one of the admins of the DragonCon Newbies group. So if you've ever come to con and come to any of the Newbies events or are planning to come for the first time, we're there to help with Q&As and meetups and walking tours and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Sue. We'll just keep marching to the left. I'll pick on Mark next. Hi, Mark.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me on. My name is Mark. I am a cosplay photographer with Blurredography. On Blurredography, I like to highlight people of color and Black people in the nerd space and people of queer identities, and just highlight them and all the things they like to do, whether it's cosplay, whether it's being a panelist, whether it's just nerding out to pop culture. This year, I will be for the first time covering press for DragonCon, and that's like a big kind of milestone thing for me. So I'm really happy to do that. And I'll also be covering my usual cosplay photo shoots, the Avatar: The Last Airbender photo shoot, and Black Geeks of DragonCon. And you can find me everywhere on the internet at Blurredography.
This is a busy bunch. Thank you, Mark. All right, Nick, we'll go to you next.
Cool. So hi, I'm Nick Lyle. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor and a certified trauma professional. And I'm also a cosplayer. And so essentially what I like to do is I love to go to conventions and nerd spaces and things like that and bring awareness of like mental health issues, of trauma. And I like to make these spaces like more safe and inclusive because I myself am a trans man, and it's very important to me to like, you know, show trans joy and positivity and make these spaces inclusive, not only for people struggling with, you know, anxiety, depression, ADHD, things like that, but also people from, you know, different identities who might not see representation of themselves in other places. I myself have autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, and so you will see me throwing this around quite a lot, and I'm not apologizing for that.
I tend to fidget when doing recordings too, but it's all down here. But sometimes I can't help myself. Yeah, absolutely. By all means, do what you need to do. All right. Thank you so much, Nick. It is great to meet you. And last but certainly not least, Emily.
I am Emily, she, her. I'm a relatively new cosplayer. I've only been cosplaying since COVID time, so since 2021 when cons opened back up. I am Canadian, so I'm Toronto-based in my cosplay, and my sister and I do panels together on beginner cosplay makeup and like a body positivity cosplay because we have very differing styles of cosplay and body types. And so we focus a lot in our panels on making it inclusive for all ages and all bodies. And our number one cosplay panel that we do is cosplay is for everybody. Because we love a pun.
No, perfect.
And this is my first Dragon Con. So Sue, I will be hitting you up with the newbie stuff.
Oh, welcome. Excited to have you as part of the fam. Just remember, once you check in, you don't check out. You're going to be coming forever. It's such a good time. Yeah.
The heat may kill me, but that's okay.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, being LGBTQIA and being in the content creation space. Something I actually want to start with Nick, because Nick, something you said really jumped out at me that I love, that you were talking about creating positivity and putting positivity out there, because, sometimes I'm sure in all of our lives, we've faced bouts of negativity. So I love that we're using content creation to put positivity out there. I'm kind of curious, Nick, how do you use content creation to create that positivity and put that positivity out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So my brand is cosplay and optimism. And so I'm just on Instagram for now. But I love using Instagram as a space to just showcase when I'm happy and I'm having a good time and the people around me are, to really share that joy. Because I feel as a trans person, it's really important to showcase when I'm feeling confident, when I'm feeling gender euphoria, especially in cosplays and in things like that. I love to share that. But then I also really love using my story and stuff on Instagram as a place to share resources, to share positivity. I follow all of these amazing quotes pages. And so anytime something resonates with me, I'll share it to my story. And so a lot of times it's just things like, what if everything worked out? I have postcards that say you're already enough, things like that is really important to me to kind of share, because a lot of times, scrolling through your timeline or looking through people's stories can be really negative, can be really overwhelming. There can be a lot going on. But I like to share a little blip of just hey, I'm happy today, or hey, this spoke to me and I hope it speaks to you.
Love that. Emily, you talked about positivity, body positivity. How do you use content creation to put positivity out there?
So I do it by just kind of being unapologetically myself in whatever I post. And the cosplays that I do range from, your typical anime characters to Janet from The Good Place. And she's not an expected cosplay that you see because it's not a popular TV show anymore, but it brings me joy. Same with Sherry Lewis when I do her. I have my stuff with it. So my positivity and my body inclusivity is I'm aware of what my comfort level is, but I would never push my comfort level onto anybody else, my sister included, because what I am comfortable wearing and what I'm comfortable putting my body in, she is not, and I do not expect that of her or anybody else that I come into contact with. And just allowing people to come into our panels and into our spaces and feel welcome and feel like they belong there, however they need to, is what we kind of focus on.
And by the way, I love Janet from The Good Place, a non-binary icon, actually.
Right.
Yeah, so
I have my cactus for her right here.
Perfect. I'll go over to you, Mark. Mark, how do you keep the positive space and create positive content as a LGBT plus content creator?
For me, I like to just be a positive ball of energy and just motivate people, regardless of what they're doing, as long as they're in front of my camera and just having fun being themselves, whether it's in cosplay or just geeking out about something or just being at a convention. I just want to encourage that. My biggest thing is I only care about what's your favorite Power Ranger and what X-Men do you identify as. If you can answer those questions, I think we're going to have a good time just having a conversation with each other.
And I don't know about like what the perspectives you've gotten over the years, Mark, but I feel like most gay individuals that I know pretty much always answer with some variant of Storm in that X-Men that you identify with, right? I don't know. At least my experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but like you'll be surprised with some of the answers people
sure.
come up with. So like I said, there are right and wrong answers to those questions, by the way. But depending on how you answer those questions, depending on how we get along, you can't really get wrong, but there are wrong answers to those questions.
Now I have to ask, what would be a wrong answer to the X-Men question? Would it be saying something like Spider-Man?
Oh my god.
That is an objectively wrong answer.
The funny thing is, you have no idea how many times people have said that, or like they have said like an Avenger character, and I get like, sometimes they just team up and stuff like that, but
Okay.
sometimes you just kind of like, oh my god, really? All right.
No, I got it. It's one of my favorite Dragon Con shirts is the one with the Dalek from Doctor Who, and it says OMG R2D2. I loved him in Star Trek. It's very that. Very that.
Skin crawl.
Sue, since we brought up Trek, I don't want to leave you out of the positivity question. How do you create positivity in the LGBT plus content space?
I think a lot of the times, at least on the podcast, when we talk about different ideas and different interpretations, there's a lot of repeating that like no community is a monolith. So like if you don't feel that way or the way that someone else feels, that's okay. And it's affirming that and validating that. And there is no one way to be a thing. And your way is your way, and nobody can take that away from you or say that that's not the right way. So I think, yeah, a lot of those discussions and just reaffirming that, like, as long as your opinion is not that we should hurt someone else, then your opinion is valid.
That's very interesting too, just considering my own perspective with the Trek space. People get very passionate about the series that is better than the other, or even just the simple Trekkies versus Trekkers, right? People get very passionate about this stuff. Yeah. But I love that. Every perspective is valid unless it involves harming someone else. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about content creation. I'm curious about how has your identity in the LGBTQIA space, how has your identity impacted the content that you create? Mark, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
That's so funny. You started with me first. I'm gonna tell you a fun story. So when I created my channel Blurredography, and even before then, when I created like any type of content, whether it was my own or working with other people, I was never fully comfortable expressing my sexuality and my identity in that regards, like so publicly. I've been out for say 20 or so years. I'm like 36 now, so I've been out for a very long time, but like just within my community, the Black community, and being able to just express who you are is not so how can I put it, a nice place to do that. So sometimes you just kind of hide who you are or assimilate, however you want to call it. And then after creating my platform Blurredography and seeing me, everybody else, but my own self, kind of had me thinking. And recently I made the switch to start bringing up more queer topics and more just things about myself, and just having an honest connection with my audience. If you follow me on TikTok, if you follow me on YouTube, you'll start to see a lot more queer positive content come out, like directly queer positive. I've never said anything negative or anything, but you can kind of tell I've avoided certain topics and certain discussion points when I review, say something like X-Men 97 or just anything in pop culture. So I had to take a pause and look at myself and say, if I want to really be the representation that I am and see the representation that I want to see, I got to be it. I got to live it. I'm not sure if any of you remember Dragon Con last year. I was there. It was the Black Geeks of Dragon Con panel. It was a really good panel. And I was on a roll and everybody was loving it. And I almost outed myself in the middle of that panel, and I paused. And at the end of the panel, like my friends who were there was like, hey, you almost did this, why didn't you? And ever since then, I've just, like I said, taken a pause and gone back. I've reviewed my own content, like how can I be better? And the first thing I realized is I can't be better if I'm still I don't want to say lying to myself, but not being honest with who I am to my audience, and just making content that I want to make and just go from there.
I connect with you a lot on that, because in the early years of doing what I was doing, I also I wasn't out right away. It took me a little time to get there and get comfortable, but I'm so glad. I hope you found Dragon Con to be a great space and very welcoming space for all that. I know I certainly have over the years, so that's awesome. I want to welcome our chatters. I want to take the same question over to Nick in just a minute, but first I want to say hello to our chatters, because we are broadcasting out there, of course, on the various DC digital media platforms. And we had a comment here from, I believe they go by Cause in chat. Hello, who said A equals advocate? Then that's what I am. This is a place of education and, helping people with good intentions get on the right path. So I know A is often mistaken as ally or advocate, and those folks are important. We need allies and advocates out there. But in the case of LGBTQIA, A actually means asexual or ace. So it's folks that, they don't necessarily have an attraction to either gender in that kind of sexual context. So that's what the A is usually reserved for in that space. So this is a place to educate on that. So yes, thank you, DC Digital Media, to who spelled it all out there for everybody, so you know all the abbreviations. But there's a lot of room in that plus sign, and there's room for a lot of you that maybe feel like you don't fit in somewhere else. There's room for everybody in the rainbow. All right. So Nick, I wanted to go to you with the same question I posed to Mark about, you had mentioned earlier on in the stream, you're a trans man. How has the trans experience kind of impacted the content that you create?
Yeah, it's been just like hand in hand throughout the experience, because I've been cosplaying for 12 years, and I've been working in mental health for about 6 years, and I've been out as trans for 5, I think. And so my very much like figuring myself out, going through my journey, has happened as a part of the cosplay community. Cosplay was a huge piece of me figuring out who and what I am. Because when I grew up, I didn't know any trans people. I didn't even know any gay people like who were out. My small town was very conservative, and the cosplay community was what really introduced me to like different ways of being, different ways that people lived and expressed themselves. And so when I first was like creating content, when I first like started my like Instagram page, it wasn't the page that I have now. I didn't know who I was. I was very like insecure. It was very much an attention grab. The things that I posted, I wanted validation like in myself and in my appearance. And as I figured out like who I was as a trans man, as someone who's in this space and not just dressing up as these characters for fun, but also because of the like gender euphoria I was experiencing. I've really channeled that into what I create now. Like my content that I create now is all very intentionally trans positive. And the sense that like I used to not feel comfortable cosplaying as female characters because it would send me a lot of gender dysphoria. It would feel like I was invalidating myself. But now I love it. I've found like a confidence in myself and in my body that like, at Dragon Con last year, I was Cammy from Street Fighter. And I was like, I loved her when I was a kid, and I'm going to rock that now. And I'm going to be her again this year. But yeah, it's been a huge journey of going from like, please validate me on the internet. I'm so scared. I'm such like a baby in my identity, to now I'm just like, I am putting it all out there. I love my body. I love who I am. I love seeing you guys do your thing. It's like so just like my like mission now to be like, love yourself.
I love that story, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing. Emily, what about you? How does your identity play into the content that you create?
So I have a funny relationship with my own identity, in that I didn't realize not everyone is bi until I was like in my mid-20s. And I was like, oh, you mean not everyone is sexually attracted to both to two genders? Okay, cool. Like, so it took me a while to like reconcile that I'm like, oh, this is not an everybody thing. Okay. So my cosplay content never really felt like it was specific to my identity, because I just assumed everyone was on the same boat as I was. And I was just like, oh, okay. But now when I like am choosing the cosplays that I do, I always have this weird conversation with myself. Was like, was I sexually attracted to this character as a child? Yes, no, okay, here we go. Like, so, and like my big one that I'm doing probably next con season is Helga from Atlantis, because she was like my bisexual awakening and didn't realize that until I was in my 20s. So like that's the content.
I love that cosplay is really a bridge between these two different experiences. I think is really great there. Sue, I'm going to go to you as well, but I'm going to call out this content here, or this comment here in our chat from Rock God of Pod. Hey Charles, it's always good to see you. Who mentions an infamous quote from a television personality who sometimes isn't perfect, but they've put a lot of really great kind of catchphrases out there, and I agree that this one is a wonderful saying. If you don't love yourself, how the hell can you love anybody else? That quote changed my life more than church did. And I 100% agree with that. Like learning to, and I think you kind of heard that in all of these answers you've heard so far. And I'm going to forecast, we probably hear in our next one too, is that being able to really embrace yourself and that identity is really that first step to being secure with it and being able to put it out there and project it. But Sue, I don't want to jump too far ahead. Please, how is your identity impacted your content that you create?
Yeah, so I am the A. I am Ace Arrow.
Okay.
So I appreciate your explanation earlier.
No problem.
And that is it's an identity that not a lot of people are as familiar with. People know what bisexuality is. They mostly know what pansexuality is. They know what gay is, and they know what lesbian is. But when you say asexual to somebody, a lot of people are still very confused. So when I became comfortable enough to be open about that, and I phrase it that way because, like many geriatric millennials who are also ace, for a long time my sexuality was too busy. But yeah, once I became open about that in my content, I realized that I was becoming an educator, and not just for my listeners, but for my co-hosts, right? And like I said earlier, we're not a monolith, but it's a different perspective that people don't hear all the time. And it has led to our show doing specific episodes about, like, well, let's talk about where we see asexuality in Star Trek, which has expanded to, let's talk about where we see bisexuality in Star Trek. Let's talk about where we see this identity, transness. So it has been a conversation starter to the point that, like, people have reached out and thanked us for helping them explore their identities, which is astonishing to me. You know, I never thought that would be something that I could say about talking about a show I like, but it's kind of astounding.
Pod Culture in our chat says there's a person very near and dear to me who is ace, and I realized that I need to educate myself more. And you know, I actually, Sue, I went on a similar journey because one of the co-hosts on the show that I've been hosting for the last 22 years, they're also ace, and that was kind of a journey that's documented on our program, actually. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of education through that process, which, you know, that's why I'm happy to turn around and share that with others. But yeah, it's putting yourself out there and being open is a huge step in being able to educate. I kind of want to piggyback on what you said at the end there, Sue, and ask that to the rest of our panel, is that, have you ever had somebody reach out to you? And I pitch this to anybody who wants to bite. Have you ever had anybody reach out to you and say, whoa, me too, or whoa, I learned something from what you were doing out there?
I'll go for sure.
Yo, please, Nick. Yeah, I saw you nodding.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's like been a huge thing for me that made me realize the importance of representation and the importance of me just like being myself in these spaces. Is there was this one convention where I was doing a tape mine for one of my cosplays. And so I had on like the trans tape, and I had like the open shirt for my cosplay, and I was just walking around like carrying myself like the person that I am. I was being, confident and happy, not worrying about it. And towards the end of the night, someone at the convention like came up to me, and like it was this younger guy, and he was like in tears, And he was just like, I just want to let you know that seeing you makes me feel so much more comfortable in my body. He was like, seeing you just have your shirt open and just be going about your business as just like this like happy person has just like made me realize that I can do it. And it's just like that like sparked something in me that was just like, I can't ever quit. You know, it was like, this is so important to just show up and just be, you know, that matters.
I love that. I need heart reacts in chat, please. Heart reacts in chat, please. This was great. Emily, Mark, anyone else, or Sue, if you want to elaborate anybody else on that question?
Yeah, like mine again, because a lot of my content and how I am in conventions is more on the body positivity aspect of it. I've had like doing panels for beginners. I've had so many parents of young kids, the young girls especially, just because my sister and I are doing the panels. Parents of young girls and young girls come up of all body sizes, just so happy to feel welcomed in a space that is really overwhelming for so many people on so many different levels. And to be able to have them, like, you know, say, reach out to me on Instagram if you have questions or if you need guidance on anything. And I've had so many of them like shoot me DMs to be like, I'm going to my first convention and like, do you have any pointers? And just being able to open up the space to the new generations and show the openness and the welcoming aspect of cosplay, because there's a lot of like nasty stuff that happens in the cosplay world, but for the most part it's so welcoming and so encouraging that like you want to feed into that and you want to welcome the next generation of cosplayers.
I love that. Anybody else on that question? Well, if there's no other on that question, I want to kind of go to something that Nick, you kind of brought up, and Emily, I heard it in your answer too, and that was about how representation matters. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're here to educate folks as well today. Who, you know, I know we might have other LGBTQIA folks listening. We may have folks that are, you know, curious, or they're just here to be allies, or maybe people that generally want to educate themselves on that. And one question, and you know, one comment we often hear is that representation matters. But I want to kind of ask the panel, why does that representation matter? And is there anybody that did that for you in the content creation space? I know it's kind of a heavy question. I'll let you marinate on that for a minute. But if there's anybody who wants to tackle it, go for it. Mark, I see you leaning into the mic. You want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my words together because, like, you know, that's clearly the biggest question that I ask a lot. Just anyone on my channel is, do you think you're well represented? And in the case of from where I come from, no, we are not well represented. You know, especially in the media and pop culture. I'm a product of the 90s. I'm an 80s baby, grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. And I happen to grow up in like a golden age of televisions, in the sense that like there was always something on to watch. There was always something for the Black community. There's always something on for like kids that were my age and things like that. And I'll give you one prime example. My favorite thing ever on earth, Power Rangers. Go figure. I bring it up in every conversation. So in the 90s, their idea of diversity in Power Rangers was just everybody wear a different color shirt. Oh, and then the one black person. And that always like seemed to bother me. I'm like, why are all black people always just squished together as this one thing? And I'm like, that's not really representation to me, and it's not really fair to everybody else that likes this stuff. And then everybody else has on just different color shirts, and one's a nerd and they wear blue, and one's an all girl and they wear pink, and one's kind of nerdy. So, you know, that kind of always bugged me, and I wanted to see just more diversity, in like more diversity, not just like the illusion of diversity, because we get a lot of that out there. I just want to see actual diversity, like people come in all shapes, forms, sizes, backgrounds, ethnicities. And if you don't see yourself in something, you'll never think you could be that thing that you see. Like, it's important to see people of color and queer people as doctors and lawyers and represented in a positive manner in media. Like, even in the queer community, in the 70s, a lot of gay characters were always made to be like a negative stereotype, or it was being gay was just this thing. And now the 90s and the 2000s have come along, that narrative has changed a lot. Same thing within the Black community. In the 70s, there were blaxploitation films where every person of color was made to be a villain. And now we live in a society where anybody Black who does anything in the news, they're a thug. But if someone of, European descent does the same thing, they're just misguided, or they're young, having fun. And I kind of hate how that narrative has been built within their society because of the lack of representation over time. I hope that makes sense. That was
No, absolutely.
You're talking about tokenism, right? Because when there's
Yes.
just one of a group, you have to represent that entire group.
Yes, and
the
it's
more
hard.
there are, the more differences you can show within that group. If there's one
Yes.
Black person, you have to represent all that has to represent all Black people. But that's not true, right? There's tons of differences within each group. There's tons of differences within the queer community. There's tons of differences within a gender. So the more we have, the more representation we have, the more diversity we have, the better it is for everybody.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all said it in our own different way that for the longest time we didn't realize there was another option. I didn't realize not everyone was bisexual. Nick didn't know any other gay people in her in his plate. It's just representation matters because of all of our experiences. We have all experienced it in one way or another. And until there is constant representation and diverse representation, everyone feels it.
Nick, is there anything you wanted to add on the representation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've barely seen trans characters at all. And I've never seen a trans character that I've related to or connected to. As much as I love to cosplay, and I would love to cosplay trans characters and bring that forward of the awareness of it, I don't know any trans characters that I have a connection with. And it's honestly really sad because across all different types of media, there's not even a book character that I would want to cosplay that's a trans character.
There was another part in that I had brought up. I'm curious if anyone has an answer for this. Maybe not, and that's okay. I'm curious if there's any content creator out there, and that could be, like Mark had brought up, sitcoms of the 70s, 80s, and so forth. Is there a character, real fiction, what have you, that served as representation for you? That was a moment where you were like, oh gosh, I feel seen.
Can I come at you out of left field for this?
Please. I hope so.
I am gonna point to the women who created the first fanzines back in the 70s. Who gathered information together, created mailing lists, basically created an analog internet to celebrate fandom. And not just Star Trek fanzines. They were for all of these properties. They were for science fiction in general. Yes, I know my cat is getting on a show.
I was just mentioning your cat is getting fan comments in chat. Yes.
Of course she is. But they were really trailblazers of fandom because it was the same women who put on the first conventions. And a lot of those early, especially Star Trek conventions, became the conventions that we all still attend today. And when we were starting out Women at Warp, as far as we're aware, there were no shows, no podcasts hosted entirely by women about the Star Trek franchise. And we sort of looked back and said, the women in this space are the ones who've been leading fandom forward since the 1960s. Why is this space so different? So we took, at least for me, my inspiration to do this comes from the people in the past who've led the way. And I sort of really just want to follow in their footsteps and bring that tradition into a different content creation space.
Anybody else on that question?
I'll throw my 2 cents in.
Yeah.
I'll say yes and no. As far as finding a character or someone out there that best represents me. The reason why I say no is because intersectionality is a thing, and I identify as a lot of things, and there has yet to be just one thing out there that identifies me. Even me out there, I still don't fully represent all of me out there, and I'm working on that. But there have been characters that are different parts of me. My favorite one comes to mind are the Moclan characters from the Orville. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that alien race. When I look at them, I see gay black men in the masculine sense, if that makes sense. And that whole storyline that they go through in that show has like, oh, I love this. Even when they brought in their daughter, which was a trans character, and that storyline, that really was like, oh, this is really good. I like this. It still doesn't fully represent me, but this is probably the close that it has come. It's just two alien characters from a show about being in outer space. That's like a mock of Star Trek.
Well, Pop Culture and Chat agrees that was a very powerful storyline from that show. I think you bring up a really great point, though, about that representation isn't always necessarily literal. Well, of course, everything you said about intersectionality is like so important as well, is that, you know, not everybody fits nicely into just one bucket, right? There's so, you know, we use a rainbow as symbolism because we're all made up of so many, you know, colors and so forth. But I think you bring up a great point, is that sometimes representation is what you see and what you perceive in characters. And I know just from my buddies, my gay buddies that are also into Power Rangers, like that franchise has never, as far as I know, had gay characters. That I think maybe recently, but like definitely there were definitely two guys on there that the fans perceived in a relationship and so forth. Sometimes, you know, it's that. Or for me, if I were to answer this question honestly, and it's probably because I come from a different generation that was before Will and Grace and before a lot of this honest representation on TV, where maybe like gay representation was like, you know, Paul Lynde on Hollywood Squares, I would actually answer this question and say, I would say Richard Simmons was a huge like icon for me, who technically is not out or even necessarily, and I don't know if Richard Simmons is gay or not, but to me, Richard Simmons was a very authentically positive person who really uplifted people around him and just really was unapologetic about being silly on television, because television is kind of silly if you think about it. So.
You're absolutely right with that. Representation doesn't have to be literal. And I'm gonna say but here. When we're talking especially about science fiction and fantasy, when, especially for the queer community, when the only representation is allegory, it's kind of a letdown. Right? Because like the conceit of the Moclans, right, is that they're all male. So of course they're a black couple or a gay couple. Not of course they're a black couple. I'm sorry. But like imagine if there was a black gay couple that was just human and it didn't have to be allegory.
Yeah.
And that brings up an interesting point, because there's this thing within the blurred space that if you make a black character in the alien blackness, and that's true. Like, it seems like Hollywood and pop culture, they'll take from our community, but they'll take away its blackness so it's easier digested to everybody else. So if you make a black character an alien, or make their skin green, or even if you go back a couple of decades, if you make a black man gay, that demasculates him and dehumanizes him in a certain way. And I hate to say, everything kind of goes back to the thing I'm going to avoid saying this time around.
Well, and a lot of people look at like Dax as a trans character, but again, you got an alien, right? So what about a human who is trans? So that allegory isn't necessary. And it's a little bit of like the 90s, where the studios are sort of trying to maybe protect themselves and not piss people off. But when we can finally have that representation without it being an allegory, I think that's another step forward. And I'm going to stop interrupting now.
No.
Well, I was going to say too that, like, you know, as I was saying about like not having like trans characters that I've really related to, I also have not had trans role models. Like, I've just like, I've really had to like pave my own way and figure my own stuff out without having anyone for like a guide to look up to for that experience. And it's like, you know, I mean, I'm 27, and a lot of times I really feel like an elder in my community on just account of like, I figured my crap out myself, and now I'm helping other people figure their crap out.
I agree with you so much, Nick. I feel like I was the same way. Like there wasn't a person in the media like Robert said, Will and Grace. I grew up in the era, but I didn't feel like Jack. I identified with Jack as a gay man. That wasn't the type of queerness that I represented with or identified with. And like you just said, Nick, you feel like that you just kind of had to figure it out for yourself. And I was the same way. And now I feel a little, I won't say jealous, but a little envious that now the next generation, they do have these icons they can look up to, or they do have people they can look up to that we didn't. So it's kind of like we fought this fight and now everyone gets the benefit from it, and you kind of just back like, yeah, we achieved so much, but it still would have been nice to have this for me growing up too. You know, it's not a bad thing, but it's like I don't know how else to describe it.
No, I think you lead to like an excellent point is that, and I think, tying again our identities to, content creation. I really think, with content creation in places like YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, all the platforms we're kind of talking about today that we all participate in, it has helped in a way make the world a little bit smaller so that we're kind of able to find our people a little bit easier. Has your experience with content creation sort of led you to be able to find your community? Emily, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the sense that fandom and finding space specifically online for fandom has helped find my people. And that is how I met our digital content creator queen, Tyra, is through fandom. And so that's how we connected on a Discord. And there's a whole group of us that just share the same ideals, have very differing opinions, have very differing life experiences, but we've all kind of gathered under this bracket of fandom and each created a spot for ourselves in that community to be open and feel welcome and be that, like, I was thinking when everyone was talking about like not having representation growing up, I grew up in the generation of fan fiction. And so like you made your own ships based on what you wanted to see. And you created it yourself because it didn't exist on TV or in media. So like you made it yourself. And it's still happening. And I think the gift and the curse of content creation online and community online is it is both incredibly empowering, but also still incredibly volatile. And when differing opinions butt heads, they butt heads hard and it's vicious. And it doesn't make you like just love what you love who you love, and let everyone else fix it. Like no one's getting hurt here.
That's a great perspective. Thank you, Emily. Anyone else want to kind of take that on about how the world getting smaller through content creation has helped you find community, potentially?
Sure, I'll go. For me, I realized the more that I unpack about myself and the more issues I deal with, the more demons I let out, the more I realize how niche of a person I am and how much I just don't fit in anywhere. So I'm going to say no. I haven't really found one community that best fits me. So I'm working on just building a community that either fits me or working on other communities and just trying to find ways that they can just, I don't want to say benefit me in that sense, but again, intersectionality is a thing. I realize there's a lot about me. I am Black, I'm gay, I have super liberal values and very conservative values, and they don't always make sense. I have issues growing up within the Black community that I'm trying to unpack and deal with. And just finding one space that accepts me is like my trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's possible, it might be out there. I'm just trying to look for it as hard as I can. I feel like it's something I need, but it's not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm. Mark, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to make sure I'm kind of like understanding what you're saying, because like I kind of get a sense from you. You're talking about not quite having found that right spot yet. You're kind of taking a bit of a, with your content creation that you do, if you build it, they will come kind of approach. Like if I put this out here, perhaps I can find those people like me because they will be consuming that content.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great way of putting that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. But well, and I think because I think it ties into something I was kind of hearing Nick say earlier. So I want to kind of throw it over to him because Nick, you were kind of talking about that you also didn't really have, a role model per se, even, at 20, which 27 is not old by the today is actually my birthday, and 27 is by no means old, it's still young. But I get, but completely
Happy
valid.
birthday.
Thank you. Completely valid what you're saying about maybe feeling elder in that space or what have you, but I kind of felt I was picking up a similar vibe with what you were saying, Nick, about building that community to help find other trans individuals into cosplay or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean the like digital space of like Instagram and stuff like that in general connected me to other cosplayers and connected me to like the cosplay community with my first experience with meeting other like queer people. And so like initially like the digital space and the cosplay scene at conventions and stuff like that was very much like life-saving for me, and just knowing that there were places I could go and be accepted. It wasn't like I made a ton of friends, like I didn't, I still didn't really know any other trans people, but I knew that we existed, and I knew that in these like spaces I could go to and be myself and feel safe. Even if it wasn't like I had like a direct connection with certain people. And, throughout my 12 years in the community, I found some people who will be friends for life, some of the best people I've ever met. And I've also met some people who have deeply harmed me. And the relationships have just been no good, because it's just like any other culture or any other community, you have to still find your people within it, right? Like, I think I initially was so blind by the fact of like, I'm accepted. This is not a place where I have to hide and not wear my Batman shirt and not, like things like that. I felt so safe at first that I didn't realize that I had to still be careful, and I had to still use discernment in the people I was letting in, and even in the person I was becoming. But now I really realize that, and I really want to be one of those people who do make the space like actually safer.
Nick, when you talk about like conventions and everything, for me personally, that also really resonates with me, even though our experiences are very different. Part of, I think, what Mark was saying earlier, when we were growing up around, the 90s and so forth, sure, we had, Will and Jack on Will and Grace, but that didn't really represent me either, to be honest. And I felt a lot of society pressure about, oh, well, you're gay, you must follow fashion, you must listen to Madonna, you must know how to, dress and color coordinate, all that stuff. And that's, yeah, right, Mark.
None of those things. Like, I do none of those things.
But there was a time I felt like it was like, oh, people just instantly thought, oh, you're gay, you must be into those things. But for me, and even God, it made dating in my early 20s hard sometimes, because it's like, no, I like playing video games. It's like, oh, you're gay and you play video games, huh? And it's like, so it wasn't until, and to get back to what I wanted to say with Nick, it wasn't until I found really these convention spaces. GamerX was a huge thing, which was literally a convention set out to connect LGBTQIA video gamers. It's no longer around, unfortunately, but that was huge for me. And being able to see like, oh my God, there's so many other people that are actually like this and are into these same types of things. And then even Dragon Con has absolutely, I think, filled that to some extent, is that, I think a lot of what you say, Nick, is very true about that. You're not going to fit with every pocket at the convention, but you're able to sort of find like there's a lot of niche especially in the cosplay. There's a lot of niche at Dragon Con, and you could dig that tunnel to kind of find your niche, which I just love. Sue, I don't want to leave this question until I give you an opportunity to weigh in. Oh, sorry, Nick, you got to follow up?
Oh, I was just saying, I completely agree. And like you were saying with like the initial expectation being like that because you were gay, you would like these certain things. The things that I would hear is like, oh, you're trans, like, I'm so sorry. It's like, oh, you're trans, you must hate your body and have a horrible life. And, obviously I struggle with things. Like, obviously it's not like an easy spoon-fed existence, but I'm at the point now where I'm just like, screw that entirely. I am trans and I am so happy. Do not be sorry for me about a thing.
I think that's crazy that someone was emboldened enough to tell you sorry for being trans. Like, what kind of, like, what? Oh my God, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
We could spend an hour unpacking that, because in some ways I feel like that's an admission of guilt on that individual, but we're gonna steer this car over to Sue, because I want to make sure you have a chance to weigh in on the community angle of this too.
Yeah, I
Finding
think
your
Nick
people.
is spot on. I think the nature of, I think, the podcasting medium means that a community sort of comes up around your content. It's, you know, you put out a fan page, you put out a discussion board, and people come to you, which is kind of, I don't know, feels like cheating sometimes. But even within that, people attracted to the content you make, there are bad actors, there are people who will hurt you, and you still there, that feeling of like, I'm finally home and I can just be open and loving and yay everybody, that you still have to protect yourself. Yeah, it's spot on. I guess the only thing I would add is the really unfortunate part is that even if you're going to attract the people who are interested in what you're saying or what you're doing, you're also going to attract the haters. And that is a thing you have to learn to deal with, and or go to therapy about. Like, and that's like, it's a little bit of a joke, but it's also not a joke. Like, it can be tough at times.
But it's important to also, like, you know, open up and talk about that, so that people know, like, it's okay to talk about mental health, right? Because I feel like that's still something our society is coming to terms with, is that we have no problem going to the ER when we're, you know, sick, but, you know, physically sick, but we don't talk enough about, many of us need the same thing when it comes to our mental health. But Sue, one thing I wanted to hit on in your answer that really struck a chord with me was you kind of talked about home. And it's interesting to me because I feel like, you know, I'm curious for your perspective being involved with Dragon Con newbies, because I hear that analogy, whether you're LGBTQA or not, I hear that analogy all the time with Dragon Con, is that Dragon Con is home. And, you know, when that convention happens for that week, people say, I'm going home to see my friends for a week.
Yeah.
Why is Dragon Con home?
Oh my gosh. I think, so the way I describe it in comparison to other conventions is that the big difference with Dragon Con is that it is a fan-run event. The studios have no say in what we're doing. So you're not going to get like execs up on stage just with their latest promotion. You're also not going to get freebies handed out at panels usually, but it's there literally because a bunch of people who love a thing want to talk about that thing. And that's what's exciting about it. My friend Kevin Batchelder, who I think also does some digital media track stuff, tells a story about a panel he did in a year where the con tried to mix celebrity and fan panelists to see what would happen. And he was on a panel with Felicia Day talking about, I don't even remember what property. I think it was a Buffy panel. Yeah, shout out to Kevin. And they didn't know what to expect. They assumed that like the whole questions, every question would be for Felicia. And he said the first couple were, but after that, it was people just asking the fan panelists what they thought about what was happening on the show. And it became a fan discussion, and Felicia got to sit back and take a break. And I think that really exemplifies Dragon Con. It's you want to hang out with your friends and talk about the things you like. And it is 100% home. I mean, some of my ride or dies, when we all get in on Wednesday, we go to family dinner, and that's what we call it. So, you know, it's the best I can do to describe it.
I love that. No, I love it. I love it. Anyone else want to speak on the panel? Just open it up. I'm sorry, Emily, because I know you have yet to attend Dragon Con, but we're gonna come back next year and ask this question. But maybe for Mark or Nick, the Dragon Con experience to you, is there anything you want to add to what Sue was saying?
Okay, I'll
I would
say Dragon
definitely
Con.
agree with.
We'll start with Mark, and then Nick. I think you're just slightly delayed, so we'll go to you next. But Mark, go ahead.
I'll say Dragon Con being home. I agree with that. I've been attending Dragon Con since 2006, the year after I graduated high school, and even before then, my dad has been attending it long before when it was called the American Sci-Fi Festival or something. So I have a long history with this convention. A lot of ups, a lot of downs. Dragon Con is the convention where I feel like I have found myself. I started my cosplay photography career. I became such a super nerd at Dragon Con. Every year I attend, I not only find something new that I've never experienced at Dragon Con before, but I also find a lot of the same comforting things, a lot of the same comforting people that I've met over the years. Even something as simple as a photo shoot. I never knew that this one photo shoot would change my entire life. Shout out to Black Geeks of Dragon Con and that entire team. But like, Dragon Con has changed my life in such a way that I never thought possible. And because of this con alone, I've been able to become myself, to become um the closest thing to my true self that I can be. And going back to that whole question about finding a space where I've best fit in 100%, I can definitely say Dragon Con has been that space. Again, it has some good, has some bad, but Dragon Con has always been that place where I've gone back to, and like, this is home, this is the con where I have to go to not only do my best, but relax and to be on vacation and to do all the work and to see all my friends and to do all this and that. It's work. Being a fan of Dragon Con, it is hard work.
Nick, I want to make sure you had a chance to weigh in too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dragon Con just feels like home because it's a place that no matter what you love fandom wise, you can find someone else who loves it. Like, I've been to so many conventions in so many places, but Dragon Con is where you can really bring that niche out and really connect with people. And it feels so cool to see people who are just passionate about what you feel passionate about. And it's a place where, if you have hyperfixations, if you have special interests, if you love something so much that the people in your life have heard you talk about it and they don't want to hear you talk about it anymore, you can go to Dragon Con and there are people who want to talk about it that much.
All right. Well, I want to try to. I can't believe it. Our hour is almost up, if you can believe it. But they said it was okay if I go a little long, so we might take advantage of that here. Especially if there's any questions in our chat. I want to thank those of you that are watching live, or if you're watching on demand, that's great too. And of course, we hope to welcome everybody to Dragon Con. And if you are going to Dragon Con, come by the digital media track in the basement of the Marriott. No, not the Marriott. Oh my gosh, I mixed up my hotels. It's basement of the Hilton.
The Hilton.
Come by. Thank you. Yes, maybe I need a tour next year. Basement of the Hilton. Come by and say hello. We'd always love to have you at the panels. But I want to welcome any questions in our chat. And I do have one more. Of course, I want to give everybody a chance to plug their stuff here at the end. But I have one more question about content creation here for myself. And that is, what impact do you ultimately hope to make with your content? So Emily, I'm sorry, I know you're all in deep thought right now, but Emily, I'm gonna start with you just because I had to leave you out that last question as a new Dragon Con person. But what impact?
I'm like making notes of like, okay, find all of the hyperfixations. Here we go.
Well, rule number one, Sue, back me up. Rule number one: you can write down everything you want to do at Dragon Con. You'll never be able to do it all.
Oh yeah.
So you gotta prioritize. Yep. All right. Anyway, Emily, what impact do you hope to make with your content?
I hope to just make people smile at the end of the day. That's why I do cosplay. It's why I have a presence online, and it's just to make people smile and be happy for like the 2 seconds that it takes them to scroll past my image. I don't want more than that. I just want other people to be smiley and happy.
Thank you. Nick, what about you? What impact do you hope to make with your content?
My whole mission for everything I do in life as a therapist, as a cosplayer, a writer, is connection. I hope to connect with people and help them feel seen and feel not alone.
Thank you. Mark, how about you?
My God, that is such a good question. I think I'm a storyteller and I like telling other people's stories and just expressing creative ideas, and I just enjoy getting my camera just going shooting fun geeky things and just making people laugh. Like, people enjoy when I'm around and we're just geeking out to stuff and just having fun being creative. So I want to take that and try to do some filmmaking in the future.
Love that.
Yeah.
Sue, last but not least.
It's a hard question because it was never part of my goal when starting any project to make any kind of impact. But I guess in sort of retrospect / moving forward, the real impact I want to make is to encourage people to open their minds, challenge preconceptions, do some self-exploration, and ask questions.
And I have to jump in on this question too, just because I've been doing a show a long time myself about video games, and I think for me, and Sue, I feel you. I didn't get into this to make an impact, but once I kind of learned somewhere along the way that, oh, somebody is actually listening to what I'm saying, and I have the ability to influence other folks and educate and do that, right? And educate by being my authentic self and everything, right? But the impact in the gaming space, especially, I want to have is that games are for everyone. Period. End of sentence. That's the impact I hope to have, is just reminding people that games are for everyone, because unfortunately in this space, that is a notion that is challenged far too often. But I want to be one of the individuals that pushes back on that and reminds everybody that games are for everyone. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to plug their content and themselves one more time. I really want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to participate in this panel. I want to thank DragonCon and Digital Media Track for having us here today. And a big extra special thank you, shout out to Tyra behind the scenes, pushing the buttons for us today, and also just helping to get this all arranged, especially very last minute. So thank you so much, Tyra, from all of us here on the panel today. But let's get everybody's plugs here at the end. Where can we find more of you? Where can I follow you, Emily?
I'm kind of everywhere at the Nerdy Body Cosplay on Instagram, not Twitch, TikTok, that's the one, and Facebook.
Great, thank you. Nick?
You can find me on Instagram at cosplay.and.optimism.
All right, will do. Thanks, Nick. Hey, Mark, how about you?
You can find me everywhere on the internet: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. I even have a LinkedIn at Blurtography.
And Sue?
I wouldn't unmute. If you want to hear me talk even more about Star Trek, womenatwarp.com is the place to go. If you want more of my cat, Instagram Noodle Bean Potato. And for DragonCon newbies, it's not just for newbies, it's for anybody who wants to learn more about the convention. There's the website dragonconnewbies.org, but we are most active in our Facebook group, which is called DragonCon Newbies. So come check us out.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much. And thank you again for allowing me the pleasure to moderate today. I'm Rob Roberts, and Linktree is probably the best to find all my stuff. I'm pretty much, like others have said, I'm everywhere on the internet except for Twitter. I got the heck out of there. So, but I'm everywhere else. You can find me on Linktree, Rob Roberts, for all my Twitch and Blue Sky and all that good stuff. So we are wrapping up for today, but I hope y'all don't go far, because there is plenty more to come here on the Be Awesome Together live stream. So I want to plug some upcoming events. Coming up next week on July 3rd, track director Charles McFall will be here because Tyra is going to be off celebrating her anniversary. Well, happy anniversary, Tyra. So Charles will have the keys. So we have no idea what's going to happen. So tune in for the train wreck that is assured when track director Charles McFall takes over the stream. On July 10th, MC Williams, who was on this panel last year, so shout out to MC Williams. MC Williams will be taking over with a panel on podcasting solo. That'll be fun. So check that out on July 10th. On July 17th, Scott, or Groove is for Life, is going to try to teach Tyra how to edit her podcast better. That is one of the biggest questions people walk in technically to DragonCon Digital Media wanting to know, like, what are editing tricks? So put that on your calendar now, July 17th for that session. And then on July 24th, Charles and Tyra will be chatting with, I hope I say this name right, please slap me if I'm incorrect, with something light though, like a pillow, chatting with Seska Small, I hope I said that right, who's the track director of the fantasy literature track. Ooh, tracks coming together, mass hysteria, who knows what will happen. That'll be a great thing. Make sure to follow the Digital Media Track on social media, and you can also join our Discord server as well. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to watch. And until next time, when we will continue to be awesome together, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.